Okay, let's unpack this developing situation in Ukraine. We've got quite a flurry of diplomatic activity happening.
Yeah, it's centered around this significant European push for a ceasefire, right?
Exactly. A really big move, it seems.
And what's interesting, I think, is the weight behind it. You had the leaders of the UK, France, Germany, Poland,
All in Kyiv.
all there in Kyiv, yes, alongside President Zelenskyy. That sends a very, very strong signal.
So it wasn't just a statement, it was more like a direct ultimatum.
Pretty much a 30-day ceasefire demanded directly from President Putin.
And they backed it up with serious threats.
Oh, yeah. The threat of massive new sanctions targeting Russia's energy and banking sectors, the real core areas.
And I heard former President Trump was also involved somehow.
He apparently supported the ceasefire call in a conversation with those European leaders. Talked about increasing pressure on Russia, too.
So why this big coordinated push right now, do you think?
Well, if you look at the broader context, it probably reflects a growing anxiety among the allies about how long this is dragging on, the human cost.
Right.
So this coordinated visit, the explicit sanction threats, it feels like an attempt to create this moment of acute pressure to make Putin, reconsider.
But his response wasn't exactly what they hoped for.
No, not at all. A pretty immediate rejection of the ultimatum, actually.
And he countered.
He did. He proposed direct negotiations with Kyiv to be held in Istanbul,
Istanbul.
with Turkey's President Erdogan mediating.
Yeah.
And he even set a date, May 15th.
Interesting counterproposal. What's the significance there? Is it just about the location?
Well, crucially, Putin mentioned wanting to address the, quote, nuances of the conflict in these talks.
Nuances.
Yeah. Suggests Russia has its own list of things, maybe security issues or specific points, that it wants discussed before agreeing to any ceasefire. It sort of flips the script on the European demand.
Right, because the demand was ceasefire first. Which brings us neatly to President Zelensky's reaction. He was open to talks.
He welcomed the idea, yes, which, is positive. But
There's always a but.
there's a big but. He insisted very firmly that a full, lasting, and reliable ceasefire has to be in place before any real negotiations can even start.
So we're stuck on the sequencing. Ceasefire, then talks, or talks, then maybe a ceasefire.
That seems to be the fundamental disagreement right now, yeah.
Why do you think Zelenskyy is so absolute on that point, the pre-negotiation ceasefire?
Well, you have to consider trust, or maybe the lack of it, based on, past experiences. Ukraine's seen ceasefires break down before.
Right, they don't want to pause used to regroup or rearm.
Precisely. So insisting on a solid, verifiable ceasefire first is likely about ensuring any pause is genuine and doesn't just lead to more fighting down the line.
And I mean, while all this high-level diplomacy is going on, the reality on the ground is still grim, isn't it?
Incredibly grim. We're still getting reports of fighting, Russian forces repelling incursions near the border, and ongoing civilian casualties, Sumy, Kherson.
And the numbers are stark. Since Ukraine first signaled openness to a ceasefire back in March, what was it? Over 117 civilians killed?
And more than 1,000 injured just from Russian airstrikes. It really underscores the urgency, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It puts all this diplomatic back and forth into sharp perspective.
And it highlights the different approaches internationally. Western leaders pushing for the immediate ceasefire using sanctions.
While Russia is saying, hold on, let's talk about our security concerns first and stop the arms flowing to Ukraine.
They're fundamentally different starting points for achieving peace.
So the big question, I guess, the one we're trying to get at in this deep dive is, can diplomacy actually work here? Can it bridge this pretty wide gap?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Can these entrenched positions be reconciled enough to even make the Istanbul talks productive, let alone achieve something lasting?
It feels like everything hinges on that first step. Will the talks happen? And can they square that circle about the ceasefire timing?
Exactly. The immediate future really depends on resolving that sequencing issue. But the continued violence just adds pressure every single day.
It does. And you're left wondering, what exactly are these nuances Putin mentioned? What specifics is he holding out for?
And how could those possibly align with Zelenskyy's demand for that full, lasting, and reliable ceasefire before talks even begin?
Yeah, that gap feels huge right now. It's certainly a complex situation the world is watching very closely.